Hi guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutrition advice. I'm trying to put together a series of videos on nutritional strategies to treat anxiety and depression, and I did a video on the connection between fatty acids and anxiety and depression previously. I wanted to do a video on Kava because I've not previously covered Kava, and it's actually quite an interesting subject in relation to anxiety. Now, Kava is a plant. It refers to the Piper Mythisticum plant, which is actually used by South Pacific Islanders. Some of the islands associated with drinking Kava in its kind of herbal form would be Fiji, Samoa, I think Hawaii as well. So the Pacific Islands have this history of consuming Kava, and nutritional science is interested in Kava because it appears to have anxiolytic properties. In other words, it has the ability to reduce anxiety. Now, of all of the herbs that I've come across, that I've looked into, Kava appears to be the most beneficial. There are other herbs that appear to be quite useful in treating anxiety, particularly valerian, and even St. John's wort can be useful against anxiety, but they don't seem to have the same effect as Kava. And Kava is a very useful anxiolytic herb, and therefore I wanted to cover it on its own in a video. I'll do another video either later this week or next week on St. John's wort and relate that to depression, and these two will go together because I think that St. John's wort is really the main herbal treatment for depression. So these two videos will go, two herbal treatments for anxiety and depression will go together quite well. So the first question to ask is, how effective is Kava? And a number of studies have looked at Kava, and the first thing to say is that they've compared Kava with current treatments for anxiety. And two drugs that can be used to treat anxiety are opipramole and buspirone. And those two drugs, when compared with Kava, they produced no greater effects than Kava. Kava was as effective as those two drugs in the studies that have compared them. And the drugs and Kava were both more effective than the placebo. So the first thing to say is Kava is effective. There is a useful paper in the Journal of Complementary Medicine and Alternative Medicine that I will put a link to in the bottom of this video, and you can look up the studies. It's a meta-analysis that's actually looked at St. John's wort and Kava, so it will be useful when I do the video on St. John's wort as well. But it's got the studies that can be looked up in terms of relating to Kava. This meta-analysis looked at a number of different studies and found that the majority of them showed that Kava was effective, more effective than a placebo at treating anxiety, and it also decreased the Hamilton scale, which is a scale that's used to determine how depressed somebody is. So Kava may also have some effects against depression. So Kava is effective. It's been shown in scientific studies that were rated. This journal only looked at studies that were rated that had good methodology and were well designed. And in these studies, the Kava performed as well as, at least as well as, the pharmaceutical drugs that are used to treat anxiety. So Kava is a useful treatment for anxiety. That's kind of that's interesting, but is it a practical treatment? The problem with Kava is that it's no longer available in the United Kingdom, in the European Union, and I think in Canada as well. You can still buy Kava in the United States, and it's probably available in other parts of the world, but you'd have to check that. So there is a problem. Obviously, if you're in the United Kingdom, Kava is going to be no good for treating your anxiety, but if you're in the United States, you can still use Kava root in order to be able to treat your anxiety. So that's the first thing to say. The availability is patchy. You can, obviously, through the internet, order things from the United States, but obviously you run the risk of the customs taking your kava if you try and import it into this country, because you're not supposed to sell it in this country. So it's very difficult to get hold of. But if you're in the United States, kava is available. I've looked on some internet sites, and you can, if you're in the United States, order kava, and it does appear to be readily available, and it's not particularly expensive. I've taken kava myself. I don't suffer from anxiety or depression, but I have taken kava. It used to be available in this country, and I saw some in a health food shop. It looks like a dry bark, which is effectively what it is. And all I did is I poured boiling water on it, and it does have a sedating effect. I could certainly understand after taking it why it would be able to treat anxiety. It does give a very calming effect. It was not an unpleasant feeling, and I certainly didn't feel drowsy, but I did feel very calm, very thoughtful, and I can understand why it's used in the Pacific Islands as a social drink. It's very relaxing. How would you take kava if you bought some? Well, the way I took it, like I say, is I just poured boiling water on it. If you read the paper and you go into looking at the studies have used different types of extract. Now, the active ingredient in kava is probably kavalactones, and these are a group of chemicals within the bark, and you have to obviously get those chemicals out of the bark, and then you have to absorb them in order to have an effect. And there may be other chemicals as well. The kavalactones have been the ones that have been identified as possibly being the active ingredients, but obviously when you make a decoction like pouring boiling water onto the bark, you want to get those compounds into the water so you can absorb them. If you buy kava in tablets, there are different types of extract that have been used, and the studies that I've looked at have used, for example, some have used ethanol extracts or other solvents in order to be able to pull these kavalactones out of the bark. There is some controversy about the best way to do that, but I did feel an effect. I could tell that I'd taken kava by pouring water onto it and just making a tea. So I think that would be the simplest way for somebody to be able to take kava. Kava may well be available in tablets, and that would be another way to take the kava. But generally what you do is you buy the bark. It comes in packets of 100 grams, 200 grams, and then you just pour, you use a couple of maybe a couple of spoonfuls into a glass, and you make a cup of tea and you drink the tea. If you wanted to be sure that you'd got all of the kavalactones out of the kava, you could then pour more boiling water on and have another cup of tea with the same bark residue that you had in your cup. Now, how does kava work? Again, this is not fully understood how kava works. It's not really even understood what is the active ingredient in kava. They think that kavalactones are the active ingredient that cause the effect, this sedating effect. And the interesting thing is these kavalactones or another accessory chemicals within the bark may have a number of different effects in the brain. They may act as a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, so that prevents the reuptake of noradrenaline, and that may be one of the ways that they prevent anxiety, and maybe one of the ways that they're also effective against depression. They may have an effect on the cell membranes, and if you remember when I talked about the connection with fat and anxiety and depression, cell membrane fluidity is possibly one of the areas that is going to be studied, is being more heavily looked at now in terms of cognitive changes in the brain. Changing the fluidity of the membranes in the brain cells, the neurons, appears to have these cognitive effects, and one of them may be able to switch on and switch off anxiety and depression. So that's another effect that the kavalactones may have. There may also be effects on the GABA system. Now, the GABA system is one of the systems that's targeted by drugs such as the benzodiazepines that are sedatives. So this may be where the sedative effect of kavalactones comes from. It may directly affect the GABA system in a similar way to benzodiazepines. But again, this is not fully understood, and a lot of this is still being pieced together. The interesting thing about Kava, which I really wanted to emphasize in this video, is it doesn't affect the serotonin system. It doesn't appear to affect the serotonin system. And if we look at the mainstream, the current medical mainstream treatment really for anxiety is to give a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And Kava shows that to be able to treat anxiety effectively, you don't need to actually affect the serotonin system, and it may not be therefore it may not be the serotonin system that is actually causing anxiety. The last thing to say about the mechanism of the way Kava works is that it seems to affect the amygdala and the hippocampus, which are the two areas that are associated with anxiety. And the fact that it affects those two areas in the brain suggests that that shows why it's so effective against anxiety. It's obviously targeting the area of the brain that is actually the cause of the anxiety. I would suggest that based on my understanding of nutrition and papers that I've read, and obviously being involved in nutrition for a long time, I would suggest that they will probably find out that kavalactones and the other compounds within Kava, they probably affect all of these systems that they're looking at. There's probably not a single magic bullet, and this is why Kava is probably so effective against anxiety. It probably tackles the problem in the brain from many different areas, from many different angles, and that gives an overall synergistic effect. Many herbs do this. Many herbs don't have a single active ingredient. They have multiple active ingredients, and they all work in together. Nature very cleverly giving us exactly what we need, a group of compounds together that have slightly different effects. They have overlapping synergism, and that causes superior effects to a single active ingredient. Nature doesn't like the magic bullet pharmacology strategy that humans employ, a single drug that targets a single receptor. Nature, in its wisdom, targets a number of different areas, and so when we look at St John's wort, talk about St John's wort, we'll see that St John's wort likely has this same effect, a number of different effects in the brain. All of those effects are very slight, which is why it's very difficult to determine exactly how the compound is working, but when you put them all together, they have an overall effect that is actually very easy to measure, because people take the compound and they feel better. So Kava is very much worth looking at. Obviously, if you're in Canada, Britain, or the European Union, you will have to look into how you can get Kava. I'm not sure it is available, but there may be ways around that. In America, it is available, so it is an option if you're living in the United States or elsewhere. The safety of Kava. When I took Kava, I had a very strange feeling on my face. It was slightly numb. It wasn't uncomfortable. It felt slightly numb. And I had read that was a possible side effect. But apart from that, I felt no side effects from taking it. I just felt very calm. I actually felt it was a very pleasant feeling, and I can understand why it's used as a social drink in these South Pacific islands. There has been, the reason it was banned in Great Britain, Canada, and the European Union is because there were some medical reports that Kava could cause hepatotoxicity. In other words, it could cause liver damage. But as usual, when you look into these cases, the people who had liver toxicity and were taking Kava were also taking pharmaceutical drugs as well, and some of them were also drinking. People have analysed the information, and Kava doesn't appear to have strong hepatotoxicity, doesn't appear to damage the liver. When you take away the fact that these people were also consuming pharmaceutical drugs that could damage the liver, and they were taking alcohol that could damage the liver, there's no real evidence that the Kava was actually the cause of the liver damage, any more than you could say that the air that they were breathing was the cause of their liver damage. They were taking compounds that were known to cause damage to the liver, yet the authorities obviously blamed the Kava. This is quite common in nutrition. Most people that have been involved in nutrition for a long time are used to this. Many compounds have been banned for no good reason. That's unfortunate, but when we look at studies that have looked at people who drink this quite regularly in the Pacific Islands, they don't appear to suffer long-term effects, and that to me is the proof of the pudding, and is in the eating. And if you go to those islands and those people are consuming this on a regular basis and they're not suffering from ill effects, that to me is a good indication that this compound is safe. There have been some reports that from studies of these islanders that they may have slightly elevated liver enzymes in particular cases. Whether that's due to the kava or due to something else, that's contentious. But the point of this is that I think if you used kava and the way it would be used, you wouldn't use it continually. It wouldn't be something you'd take every day. The way I would see taking kava would be I would keep it in the cupboard, and when I felt that I would keep it with me at work or in the car. And when I felt like I was feeling anxious, or I felt like I was going to have a panic attack, I would then take the kava. It's not something I would take every day. I don't think, it's the same with valerian. Valerian is very useful for those people. I know some people suffer from anxiety all the time, but I think generally those people that suffer from the generalized anxiety disorder, this GAD, quite often they go through episodes of feeling anxious and then they're okay. So I don't think you need to take these compounds all the time. Obviously, if you take kava all the time, the risk of if it is damaging to the liver, that risk would go up if you take it all the time. If you only take it occasionally, I can't see that there would be any problem based on what I've read about the effects of kava. Obviously, you shouldn't take kava with alcohol. You shouldn't take a lot of these herbs with alcohol. I wouldn't suggest sitting down if you're anxious and taking valerian tea and alcohol together, just because interactions are always unknown. And I think if you're taking kava tea, you wouldn't, if you're anxious, you wouldn't want to take the alcohol anyway. So you've got to be careful about these interactions. You've got to be sensible. But based on, like I say, I'll put the link to this study that's looked at a meta-analysis. There is a section on safety, and that you can read it. There are some safety concerns, but they appear to be exaggerated. And like I say, if you actually look at the people, the islanders that drink this regularly, and I mean they drink thousands of bowls of this in their lifetime, they don't appear to be adversely effective, which to me suggests that this is quite safe. But again, you have to do your own research. You have to be your own nutritionist, and this is for information purposes only. I'm not suggesting you should go and drink kava. I'm just talking about the science that's been done and what the science has said in terms of anxiety. I don't think there's anything else really to say about kava. It comes, it's quite widely available. If you want to get hold of it, I'm sure you could get hold of it. It's certainly worth trying. It's certainly one of those things that you could add to your arsenal of treatments and strategies if you do suffer from anxiety. If you have any feedback on using kava, I mean, I've used it, but I don't suffer from anxiety, so it's very difficult for me to say personally that it would have helped anxiety. If you have taken kava and you suffer from anxiety and you found it helpful, please put a comment in the comments box below, because it will help other people watching this video, and it will, I do like people to comment so that other people can read the comments and they can use that information to be more informed. Sometimes anecdotal information like that is very useful. Can't get all the information from studies. Studies can't cover all the information, and anecdotal information is often just as important. So if you've got any anecdotes about kava, using kava, then please put them in the comments box below. Like I say, I will put the link to the paper in the comments box below so you can read that. Hopefully this has been interesting, and those people who who do suffer from anxiety can think about whether they want to try kava and whether that would be a useful strategy, and they can do some more research. There are books available on kava that explain exactly how it works. The last thing to say about kava is there are synthetic compounds that have been made in the laboratory. They're synthetic kavalactones, I think, and they're called L-carvane, and they're not really as effective as the whole herb. If you want to use kava, avoid the L-carvane, which is a single isolated, I think it's a single isolated synthetic kavalactone, and stick with the whole herb, because we don't know which of the compounds in the bark are effective, and therefore you should really do what the Pacific Islanders do, which is drink the whole drink and get all of those effects. And they drink their drink as a tea. They don't use an ethanol extraction or any of these fancy things the scientists do. They simply put water on the root and they drink it as a tea. So I think that's probably the best way to take it. So I hope that was useful. If you've got any comments, like I say, leave them in the comments box below. And I will get back to you as soon as I can, and I will see you soon probably next week or later this week for another video. And in the meantime, take care.